I tracked down a friend and got access to a chocolate bar of mushrooms. And I ate like one little square. And when you're on SSRIs and you take psilocybin, it naturally psilocybin can cause a little bit of nausea with certain people, with GI issues, and then some anxiety. It can just be a little ungrounding, you know. And that's part of like the process, is that it's sometimes not that comfortable to take, and sometimes it can be once you kind of get through this like uneasiness. And when you're on SSRIs, you take psilocybin and it calms all of the nausea and all of the anxiety, and you just get all of the blissful high in this very spiritual. Some people call it like God mode. It's just crazy. I don't know, but I've read it through Reddit, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what they're talking about. And so I had one, and I was like, oh, this feels great. And so I'm like, well, I'm an addict. So I mean, I didn't think like I'm an addict, but like naturally, like I tried the whole thing, you know, I was like, this is great. This is fun. And,
my experience was similar.
Yeah, right. And when did you do that?
It was March of, well, actually it was the day after I turned 50. So it was March of 23.
Did you do it by yourself?
With a shaman.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, cool. Wow.
Yeah, but same sort of thing. Set out to do a therapeutic dose under 2 grams. And next thing I knew, I was doing 7 grams.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's serious.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, you know, you did it too.
Yeah, of course. Wow.
Okay. So then what happened?
I ate
the whole bar?
I ate the whole bar. And I had I wish there was a better term for it, but it's the truth. I had like an ego death experience. And I witnessed myself dying. Everything in your body knows that this is the end of your life, you know? And you're like, I've really done it this time. And I had no idea.
That is the thought that goes through your mind. It's like, oops.
It is this oops. It's 100% this oops.
Yeah.
And still, it's so funny you say this oops. Still in like my ayahuasca ceremonies or ceremonies today, I have this like, every time I get to the place where like I'm hitting the threshold of actually like the medicine setting in, when it's usually like a higher dose, there's some weird noise that I hear in the back of my head that is the noise I used to make almost as a child in my head if I was like balancing on something and would like lose my balance. Like this almost oops or whoa.
Like you're about to get hurt or something's about to go down.
But it's not a vocal sound. It's actually a mental sound of like an uh-oh almost. And so it's funny you say that because every time I brought it up a few months ago to some friends, but I hear this like uh-oh. So yeah, I had this oops, like, oh my gosh, witnessed myself die. I kind of like watched myself in the third person. It's like lying on the ground, called 911. Call failed. Like I remember like in you know, when you're in these states, you know, everything makes sense and some like screenshotting. And I'm like, of course, like God didn't allow the, you know, cops or the ambulance to.
So you were alone.
I was alone. Yeah. And I eventually, I had this ego death and everything in my life flipped upside down. I came out of that experience and my religion had changed. I left the church. That's the religion. That's what happened. My politics had changed. I wouldn't say my politics had changed. Yeah, I guess so. I think I was like Trump, you know, going into this because that's where I came from. And then my social issues changed. You know, I think I realized that I had bits of racism that had just been ingrained into me as a child. I just realized all of these different things, aspects about me. My relationship to money changed. My relationship to women changed. Like I had one of those like 4-hour experiences where I just got put through some filter. And on the other side was this guy that was not like the guy that went in. And I could tell this is fun. To go public about this. So with the SSRIs, like, you know, they can create this, a bit of a hypomania, where extreme highs and honestly, like if they're lows, I wasn't experiencing any lows, but what happened was I had this experience, came out of the other side and then now had, this new deep, I'd left the church because over the 4-hour experience, I had seen like every manipulation, like conspiracy that the government or the religious, I guess, how do I put it? Every form of organized religion and political government, you know, power structure became very clear to me in what they were, you know, and I'm not an anarchist whatsoever, but I definitely was like, oh my gosh, like it's just been lies and manipulation and I'm sorry, I apologize if you're religious, but like for me, I just realized I think Christianity's done such good things in this world, but I also think it's really held people back. And I think it's been used as a form of manipulation to calm society and kind of keep them in line a little bit. And that just didn't feel right to me because I had this very deep experience with Jesus, and I came out on the other side, and I actually, for the next 3 months, here we go, I thought I was Jesus Christ. Did I tell you this when we were met?
But you're not the only person this has happened to.
I know. I've met a lot of people that this happens to.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
And I think the reason it happened to me was because I was on the SSRIs. And that just allows you to stay in this place of bliss and never really ground. And I also just kept eating mushrooms like every day for 3 months afterwards, you know, and you can consume higher doses of it because the nausea and anxiety's kind of gone away. And yeah, I mean, it's a crazy place to exist in, to where you think and everything in your life is telling you that you are the second coming of Christ, or you are Christ. Every photo I looked at, I saw Jesus in it of myself. Every number I saw was telling me something. It was a fascinating place to live. And it was the most powerful, impactful 3 months of my life, because in that moment, it's like I eventually came down. I just want to like state that, like, I don't think I'm Jesus anymore. I actually think we all have this like Christ conscious, like,
I was about to say,
capacity
are we all?
inside. 100%.
Yeah.
Like we all have this like in us, you know, and whether it's Buddha or Christ, you know, we have this like this energy, we can access this, you know, and we can all be that representation of human being, spirit, whatever. And, but that 3 months, I decided to like give my life over to just like justice and like humanity, you know. It sounds like so bold, or, you know, I don't know.
I understand.
Crazy, but
I understand. Yeah,
right.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
It is hard to say out loud when you have that feeling, because it's such a strong feeling, and it's scary because it feels like, God, it feels so grandiose and so egoic.
Oh my God.
But that's not where it's coming from.
No, not at all. It's
coming from service.
Totally.
Wanting to be of service, wanting to be that channel.
Totally.
That you said.
Totally. Absolutely. Finding purpose in that too. You know, you just all of a sudden you like align with something that you're like, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for all my life. You know, I'm not talking about the drugs. I'm talking about the purpose, you know, and the connection to your spirit and your emotions and your nervous system, you know, and I think that's also what the purpose thing has a lot to do with, for me, like my sobriety has a lot to do with, because I say sobriety. I'm sober specifically from alcohol and specifically from ketamine, which I'll get into the ketamine stuff here in a second. But the purpose is like, it's so much of, I think, people getting sober and getting out of depression and anxiety. I think that's it. It's not even addiction. It's just like treating mental health is so much about finding purpose, you know? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. My deepest and darkest depressions have been when I didn't have purpose. It's so true.
You're just lost, right? Like,
yeah.
Don't know why you're doing what you're doing.
Exactly. Why keep going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really leaned into the Bible, like became a huge Jesus fan. And I traveled around with a backpack. You know, I was like also like kind of like on the top of my game. I was like 26, and I overnight like got over the sadness and depression of the breakup too. I ended up like wiring, like when I came to in the morning, like I wired my ex-girlfriend like $5,000, which was like a deposit. I had put down like a $10,000 deposit on this house that we were living in. She was like down on her luck. And I was like so resentful. Like I held on to the deposit, you know, of this money. When I had money. Like I could have just given it to her. Right. And all of a sudden it was just like, dude, you're a dick. Give her the money. Like, what do you know? So like my relationship to money just completely changed. And I viewed it as more of this, like this transfer of energy, you know, and just this thing that like you have
comes
to
and
keep,
goes.
you have to like keep it in circulation. You hold on to it. It's, what good is it? You know, it's like, just use it to, it's energy and fuel to like keep building the thing. And if you don't have purpose, you know what you're doing, then sure, you're going to sit on your money and you're going to like put in some like mutual fund. But like, if you got purpose, like, you know exactly what to do with it, and you listen to your intuition and you just kind of know how to channel it out. And so I kind of went through that with her, and then did the 3 months. And in the 3 months, I ran around. I had a backpack full of like, I'd bought like a half pound of psilocybin of magic mushrooms, and I kept it in my backpack. And I would give it to anybody that would give me the time of day to hear what I had to say about psilocybin. I became a 100%, because I had done all this research around Jesus, and there's a lot of like, there's a bunch of fascinating like pseudo evidence that like he might have like been talking about. There's something that refers to in the Bible many times, this object called mana, M-A-N-N-A, and which is mana means hand, or in Spanish culture, hand of God is also psilocybin. And so he refers to mana many times in the Bible, and it's very clear in a handful of those that like he might actually be talking about psilocybin. He talks about like how there's this portion of the Bible, and I'm going to butcher it, but he says like, and then, you know, the children would go and fetch the mana on the dewy grass in the morning. And it's like, well, where do mushrooms grow? They grow on like the dewy ground, you know? So I kind of dove into that. And I was like, okay, I'm Jesus, you know, give out the mushrooms, you know? And so it sounds so crazy to say this out loud, but I did. I give it to Uber drivers, whatever. And then I realized, okay, so I'm still on the meds. I should probably try to figure out how to get off the meds. So I started weighing myself off, and that was, it was easy until I literally got off my last dose of Lexapro, and I started getting these brain zaps. And so I describe them brain zaps. And there's actually a clinical term called a brain zap. And I don't know, I thought I invented this myself, you know, but it would feel like you just get like electricity blown across your brain like 12, 15 times a day randomly throughout the day. Terrible feeling. And then about 5 days after I fully took my last dose, that's when I was completely off. And I fell into, I very quickly grounded from Jesus, you know. I became suicidal ideation, like depressed for about a year. Yeah. And I couldn't take the psilocybin anymore, because now I was actually feeling like what it takes to take psilocybin. I felt the nausea and anxiety. I was like, this is not fun. Like I white knuckled it for a long time. I eventually did like one deep psilocybin journey by myself at my house that treated my depression for like a week, and then came back, and then I would do hot yoga every day for like 3 months. That really helped a lot. But I still remember I'd cry every morning in hot yoga, and I'd cry on the ride home. I've got photos. I've got an album I found a lot of purpose in my process, which is why I didn't ever get back on the meds, because I was like, you can't fucking get back on these meds, because there's so many people that need to know how to get off, because I think we're going through this like mass exodus of like big pharma right now. And there's not a playbook on how to get off these things. And so that's like the purpose thing, right? It's like, okay, dude, this sucks, but like, I would take photos of myself. I would video record. I would journal every single day. And I would just talk about what I was doing to like treat my depression and getting off of, and they call it discontinuation syndrome, which can last for potentially like the rest of your life. They have no idea how long this will last. My depression and anxiety is like, I think I operate at like a 9.5 now out of a 10. Like I'm incredible now, but it's only because I found like 25 different things that I have to incorporate into my life to like keep it away, you know? And so going through this process, and then I found ayahuasca. A friend of mine in the cannabis industry was like, hey, like, I think you should really come and try ayahuasca. I went to my first ceremony in Santa Cruz, California, sat with a gentleman named Benki Piaco of the Shipibo tribe out of Peru. He is, the medicine protocol is, the Shipibo, there's many different traditions of ayahuasca, but Shipibo is like you sit cross-legged on your mat and you kind of have a blindfold and you're in your own world. There's no talking. There is music, but it's very much like in your own world, you know? And I went and I did it, and I just leaned into it hard. I drank as much as I could. on the first night. I did the same thing on the second night. And it I mean, again, it was one of those like psilocybin moments. It was like, oof, veils lifted, depression gone, anxiety gone. Like, wow. Deeper understanding of my purpose, myself, who I was. And that lasted for, I'd say, like 3 weeks. And then eventually the depression crept back in. And so I kept having to go back to these ayahuasca ceremonies. And ayahuasca is an incredible medicine, but it's very hard to find. And it's just difficult to do. It's not the most easy thing to do. It's, it can be taxing because you do it overnight. And so I did 2 other like traditional ceremonies, one with Shipibo, one with the Huni Queen, had incredible experiences, but eventually I'd come back 3 or 4 weeks later. And then for my birthday or for Christmas, a year after I'd gotten off the meds, my grandmother, she asked me like what I wanted for Christmas. And I told her, I was like, and she was struggling with dementia at the time. And she was struggling with depression. And I was like, I really want to not be depressed, and I said, I want to try intravenous ketamine. And so she gifted me 6 sessions of IV ketamine in Midland. Yeah. And because at the time, I was really, when I was depressed, I kind of like walked away from all of my work. I couldn't keep it together, and I think I was living with I was still living in California, but I was spending a lot of time with my family. I was so depressed. I just wanted to be around somebody and something, and I couldn't focus on work. And she gave me these sessions. And it was also a little like, I was kind of beta testing it for her too. Cause she was open to it. She told me, she was like, if it works for you, like I'm open to it. And so I went in, and after 3 sessions, and it was like the first time that like this ketamine clinic had like just opened. It was like 2020. And thank goodness these women were awesome. It's called Ketamine Clinics of West Texas. Tammy is the name of the founder. And I had my first session, kind of interesting experience. Like, okay, came back down to earth. Actually, no, I take it back. My first session, it's an anesthetic, so like numbs your whole body, right? And complete disassociation. And I want to preface this by saying, I'll probably say this again eventually. Ketamine is an anesthetic. It is not a psychedelic medicine. It is a anesthetic, a pain numbing agent that has very psychedelic properties if used in a very high dose. And the high dose that you use can create this like very disassociative, colorful kaleidoscope kind of experience. And had my experience, and in the experience, a lot of times in your experience, like for me at least, like everything makes sense, in this like ketamine experience, and then you come out of it and it's like, what, I can't even remember what just happened, but something that was special. What was it, And what I do remember was like, my first experience, it was like, dude, you need to run and meditate every day. Like that was it. You need to run, meditate, and eat better every single day. Like that's going to pay off.
Wow. So that aspect of your lifestyle came from the ketamine. I was going to get to that in a bit. So that came from the ketamine. Huh?
It actually didn't come from the ketamine. It was reminded by the ketamine. It came from psilocybin and ayahuasca.
Okay.
Because I was just realizing like, you have this like, it's like rocket science, right? It's like you have like psilocybin, all of a sudden you like see yourself in the third person, and then you like look at your body and you're like, what is this thing? And you're like, wait, everything I eat, I process, and then it turns into my body. So like I should probably stay away from pesticides and like the pharmaceuticals. I don't know about that. And the heavy metals, like the fluoride, whatever, like, which by the way, the fluoride thing, I don't know if you like followed that, but like the FDA just came out like 3 weeks ago. And the whole conspiracy that everybody's been talking about with too much fluoride in the water, like they think that there's like 2.5 times more fluoride in the water than there should be.
That's terrifying.
Terrifying. Yeah. So go look it up. I'm sorry. But the ketamine was like breath of fresh air, right? Ketamine gives you this, because it almost numbed, because depression and anxiety, at least for me, is such a nervous system issue too, because like I got off of the meds and all of a sudden my body's been numb from age 15 to 26 years old. So I walk into a room, I have to retrain myself how to walk into a room and not freak out, So it's very physical for me. And so to get to numb my body was such a relief. And then all of a sudden my brain and my thoughts can kind of come in, and that's what kind of I was reminded, okay, run, meditate, eat clean. So next day I start run, meditating, eat clean. Don't really feel that much better, but like I got a little breath of fresh air. And after the third session, the depression had gone from like 9 to like 4. And after the 6th session, it was like gone. And 3 weeks later, that was kind of like my cycle, 3-4 weeks, came back, and I would just go in for one booster. And I do one booster every 3 to 4 weeks for the next year and a half. And then now I'm getting like my life back together and, going to ketamine. I mean, ketamine's like, out of pocket. It's like $600 a pop. It's like not cheap and it's hard to find at the time. There's more clinics everywhere now. And so I was like, well, I'm traveling back in business again. I'm traveling a lot. It's hard to set up these appointments. Why don't I just like buy ketamine, Yeah. Yeah. Uh-oh. Why don't I just buy ketamine and then I'll just like give myself like my own, ceremony, right? Once every few weeks. And, on the street, it's like usually powdered. You can buy vials of it, but it's usually powdered. Obviously illegal. This is Schedule 3 narcotic. So I found it, I bought it. And so, I had my session and then I went, I did my solo session and, I'd sit there and I'd like meditate and I'd do my thing and that was helping. And then, every 3 weeks turned into every 2 weeks and turned into every 5 days. That turned into eventually every 2 hours.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. I know. And, it lasted for a little over 2 years.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And how did you get out of it?
My incredible wife. And also one of those experiences of like driving the Porsche and flipping it, it was like, boom. I had I just mentioned that I got married at Burning Man. 2 years ago, we were at Burning Man for the first time. And, we stayed in there's an organization that I know, but I'll share it. It's called MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. It's taking MDMA through the FDA right now. We've been donors for a long time. We're investors in their new biotech company. Founder's a very close friend of mine. So the founder's like, you should come and stay at our camp at Burning Man because Burning Man's a big, just a big tradition for MAPS. They have this whole camp, and part of MAPS, they're really drug policy reform advocates, and they really just push legalization. Their attempt at getting MDMA through the FDA is obviously an attempt at treating PTSD and solving the mental health crisis, but they're much more broadly they have a broad approach to like legalizing plant medicines everywhere. And they have an organization called Zendo, and Zendo, an amazing organization. It's a nonprofit that goes to music festivals all around the world. And if you're having a tough or difficult, could be psychedelic experience, a lot of time it's psychedelic, but tough just like experience in general, like you just need to talk to somebody. Like they've got licensed psychotherapists and non-licensed psychotherapists that have just been kind of trained to like help facilitate and sit with people like guides, And so we're staying in the MAPS like Zendo camp. Never been to Burning Man. Walk in, park our like Sprinter van. I can still remember driving in and I was going like, how do people end up in Zendo? Like how do people like have this experience and like I've had tough psychedelic experiences, but I'm like, how do you manage to like have one at Burning Man and then like need to go sit with a therapist or even just have the confidence to go and be like, I need to go to that place over there and talk to somebody, as opposed to just like going in your room and like just writing it out. So I couldn't imagine how people would end up there. And I, on night 6 or something of, I've been addicted to ketamine for like 2.5 years. My wife's the only one who knew, my fiance at the time, she's the only one who knew. And I had two manic episodes. I came home on 2 different occasions and I smoked cannabis. And ketamine combined with cannabis, ketamine can like amplify anything. Almost as like a microscope on whatever molecule you're like putting in your body. And it had this way of, this has happened maybe like twice before, but it had this way of like, cannabis is like very misunderstood. And I unfortunately think a lot of people have the wrong dose and they get anxious or they took the wrong strain or whatever. And I think it's really unfortunate because for me, sometimes I'll smoke cannabis or consume cannabis maybe like once every 3 weeks. And sometimes I'll smoke like a few nights a week for like a week. And then like I'll stay off of it for like, not stay off of it. I don't want to say like I'm staying off of it, but like I won't use it for like a month or so. But sometimes I'll consume it. And it's very similar to ayahuasca for me. I'll lay there in bed, going to sleep if I'm still like a little like high and just kind of download after download of just like insight, just channels in, and so that's kind of what happened with, it's not actually kind of what happened, I guess, with the ketamine combination. I think plant medicine has a way of doing for yourself what you can't, what did I say earlier? It does for me what I couldn't at that time do for myself, which is kind of like this like cry for help with the alcohol, more or less, right? And so when I took it with the ketamine, it sent me to where I think I needed to be, which was in this like manic state, not knowing where I was, not knowing what I was doing. And this happened on 2 occasions. The first night was a little more mild. Made a scene in front of Sylvia, my wife, scared her. And then she's like, all right, like I obviously can't do that again. We talked at the Zendo camp. And fortunately I had like really great people around me that were there to walk me through this and advise me and kind of take care of me. And I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna do that again. And sure enough, next day, like in the day I started using ketamine again. And that evening I smoked cannabis again and had my manic episode, and I pushed my face through a full-length mirror.
Whoa.
Yeah, I had this experience where I thought I was in one of the towers in 9/11, and I was with Sylvia, and there's like a fire behind us, and we're at the window looking out. We're on the 90th floor, or whatever, and I was like, we have to jump. And the thing that I was jumping into was actually this mirror. I was looking at a mirror at myself, and Sylvia's in between me and the mirror. And she wasn't at the time. I think I was like right here, and the mirror's right here. And I'm pushing my space through this mirror, and I ended up slicing my face up right here at the top of my head, and all of my wrists. And Sylvia had to get in between me and the mirror and stop me. And she was like, you were using every ounce of your body mass to push through this mirror, and I couldn't stop you. And I really tore up my knee, and I scared the shit out of her. She had like scratch marks in her back, and then she's calling for help. We're in a Sprinter van. She's calling for help, and fortunately somebody hears her. It's like 3 a.m. I mean, Burning Man people are up all night, but like somebody hears her and comes over and opens it up and like helps like pull me off of her and pulls me out. And I just start saying like nonsense. And I took off all my clothes, and I looked at Sylvia, and I told her I was gay, and like just saying just the wildest things that aren't making any sense to anybody. And then eventually like I start coming down, and I realize what's happened. And that was my bottom, and I'd realized what I'd done, like processing, like what the real bottom, like wasn't the embarrassment of like saying I was gay or like getting naked in front of people. It was 100% the fact that I could have killed Sylvia. Like I could have actually hurt her. And I don't know. I'm just like, I don't know. I have this history of like, I guess I don't know. I go full throttle. In AA, they say like, you don't need to hit a bottom, and it's like I laugh at it because I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Like, but I've hit 2, and I had to hit 2. I've tried to quit ketamine so many times, and there was, the founder of Zappos, he very famously, like, they say it was nitrous, but it was really ketamine that he kind of burned himself alive accidentally in a shed. And I knew friends. I've got a lot of mutual friends with him, and they tried so hard to get him to stop, and I just remember hearing my friends telling me about their experiences with him, and I started writing this piece like maybe a year and a half into my addiction that I was going to come public at some point. I like talked to like Business Insider, and I was going to come, and we were going to do this whole piece where I was going to talk about psychedelic VC and I eventually did something. It was like after the fact that I'd kind of come out, but I'd work on it every week. I'd like apply right into it. I just couldn't get myself to come out about it. And, cause it's really tough, it's like, ketamine's one of these things. It's like, it helps until it absolutely doesn't, and I think, and I have to say, like, I sit on the board of Heading Health. It's a successful like ketamine clinic here in Austin and Dallas. And I'm a big proponent of intravenous ketamine. What I'm not a proponent of is the direct consumer ketamine. I'm a little conflicted too, because I'm like, actually, I say I'm conflicted. I'm a bit of a libertarian, so like I kind of like less regulation, but when it comes to these pharmaceutical drugs, they're not plant medicines. I'm all for plant medicines being completely legalized. When it comes to pharmaceutically manufactured drugs like opioids and ketamine, needs a lock and key, and people shouldn't be allowed to take them home, and people are allowed to take them home right now.
And they're getting conflated. They're getting confused.
Totally. Absolutely. They're absolutely getting confused. And what's happening is that people are, Matthew Perry's unfortunate death with ketamine too. It's like this whole, we have to fix the note. That's why I stopped at the beginning of this. I was like, ketamine is an anesthetic. It is not a psychedelic medicine. It has psychedelic properties. Like we have to fix the nomenclature around how we discuss ketamine, because I would think so often when I was addicted, I was like, I'm so glad I did not try heroin, because of course, like I would have been a heroin addict. Like I can't imagine trying to quit something more that is more of a hold on me than this drug. And I've talked to so many people that I've had somebody reach out to me the other day. I probably once every like 3 or 4 weeks, I have somebody reach out to me because I'm pretty public about my story. And they'll find my number and they'll text me or email me and say, hey, can you meet up or get on the phone, And it's happening. I don't want to call it the next opioid crisis or epidemic, but like shit, it's the number one party drug in China right now. Like I think we have to just start talking about it, and like, I think the only way to go about it is like the harm reduction approach. Like it's going to be out there. We're going to get it on the street. People are going to go to a party and their friends are going to have it. They're going to try it and they're going to end up maybe in some similar story to me. And I just think people need to be made aware of it. I fortunately was very, very lucky I did not suffer any of the negative physical side effects. There are people, you go to the ketamine addicts subreddit and I mean, story after story of colostomy bags and complete, loss of bladder and destruction of kidneys. And
how did you get yourself off of it?
I would stop.
You just stopped. It's so fascinating. It's just like with alcohol.
Yeah, you
just made the decision.
Yeah.
So where are you now physically? So physically, for those people that aren't watching the video, you're like crazy fit. You're like the picture of health. I mean, where are you? What are you doing physically, and where are you physically and mentally and emotionally?
I'm better than I've ever been. I dedicate the better than I've ever been right now. I think I always like go through waves. Like, what do I dedicate the mental health to? Meditation, 100%. I try to meditate at least 10 minutes every day. I try for 20 every morning. I think meditation is just so key. It's like, and if you haven't ever meditated before, like, I just encourage you to like, those who haven't, to like try it for like 4 days and then on purpose, don't do it on the 5th day and then just watch what happens, and then all of a sudden you may not realize it when you're meditating, but once you don't meditate, you're going to realize what meditation actually did for you, and so that's been a big one for me. It's just been reconfirmed over the past couple months about how important that is. I don't run as much as I used to. I used to run like 25 miles a week. I have a strong intention of getting back into that. I got off of testosterone replacement therapy. I was put on that when I was on Adderall or when I was getting off my Lexapro too, because like my cortisol spiked, my testosterone dropped. And I mean, there's been a lot of long-term effects from these drugs, but I specifically was on testosterone and then I got off. And so that's been tough, but I'm like slowly like getting back to where I was. And testosterone has a lot to do with motivation and working out and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I meditation, fitness, I'm super positive and optimistic. Like I do this thing called this 3-6-9 method, which is, rumor is that like Nikola Tesla came up with it. I don't know if it's true or not. I like to believe it's true, but the story is that whenever he was solving a problem, some sort of technological, invention, that he would have this 3-6-9 program where 3 times in the morning and 6 times in the afternoon at lunch, and then 9 times at night, he would write as though in the past tense, as though, or like in the present tense, as though he had solved the problem he was trying to solve. So if he was like trying to like develop some sort of like transistor, he was like, I have solved X, Y, and Z transistor, and it works perfectly or whatever. And what he was doing apparently, and I can confirm that this is absolutely how this works, is you're kind of just brainwashing, you're reprogramming yourself to believe in the absolute possibility that whatever it is you're working on actually can exist and does exist. And therefore, as you're going throughout your day and you hit a little speed bump and whatever you're goal is that you're working on, like it doesn't work out, like, maybe you hit some small little speed bump or failure, whatever, your mind doesn't go straight to, oh my God, I'm never going to solve this. It actually goes back to this weird place of like, oh, I've already solved this, and like, whether or not that's manifestation or not, whatever, it's like, it doesn't matter. Like for me, it's worked. It's worked many times in my life where I've just been like trying to solve a really hard problem. And, are we good? Oh, okay. Sorry. No, sorry. It's been, I've been like trying to solve a really hard problem, and I've just told myself that I could do it, and I get to that place. I can still remember like, I did this on my own when I was getting off of my meds at one point. And I had this business partner that was like really like, was not going good. And I had to reprogram how I thought about him as a human being, in like a more positive, like loving way. And I applied that to a business situation 6 months ago that I almost threw the towel in on like 3 times. I'd inherited these like very unfortunate partners in a company that I bought. They were wearing me out. I'd never been in this situation in my life. And I believed so much in the business, but I just couldn't put up with them. And so I kept writing to myself, and then business was like that. It was a cannabis company. We lost a license because of these 2 people. And it was like, I was hemorrhaging cash. I was so stressed. And I remember this, I was like embarrassed to call my investors and tell what's going on. And I would write, the company's called Noble Pacific. I was like, Noble Pacific is cash flow positive, and I have loving and kind business partners, and it was like as simple as that. And 3 weeks later, and I just kept doing it, and every day, it just pain after pain after pain, and almost threw in. And 3 weeks later, I got a text from the woman that was like a pain, and she wanted to get bought out. She texted me and she asked to get bought out, and
it just happened.
And it just happened.
I'm a big believer in that. I'm a huge believer in manifestation and saying things out loud. Just put it out in the universe.
Totally.
Put it out in the universe. And
Totally.
My favorite Jay-Z quote, I know I mentioned it to you, is I believe like you can speak things into existence.
Yes.
I mean, I totally believe that.
100%.
Okay, so let's talk about what you are speaking into existence. So you have 2 things going right now. You have Ultranative, and then you have Minds. Tell us about Ultranative and the fund, and then tell us about what you're doing with Minds.
Cool. Yeah. First of all, I love what you just said. I forgot about that Jay-Z quote. I do think that that's real. And I think, I also like, you're asking, like, if there's one thing I wanted to like get across today to people, I think is like, this came to me like a few weeks ago, but like, don't wait for an exit to realize you can do anything, And I feel like so many entrepreneurs, like they are just building. I just to myself, they're just building and building, and they want that exit and they want that big liquidity event, and only until they get to that point, for so many people, are they going to realize like, oh my gosh, like I can actually do the thing that I set out to do 10 years ago, and it's like, you have to like, I feel like for me, like, and the way that I keep going in life and I'm so optimistic and positive is because I just look at, it's just like little victories, and you just like look at them and you're like, and then you process like, okay, wait, I had an idea to do that. And then it actually happened. And then I look back in my life and I'm like, most of the things that I wanted to do, this is like a complete like ego side. It's like most of the things I wanted to do, like I actually pulled off, and maybe I didn't pull it off the way I thought I was going to pull it off, but it's also about like, it's almost like, how do you fail? Like how good can you fail? And how can you actually just roll a failure into like an open door and then just keep like, have that North Star, there's a million things that have to happen between now and then that end point, and then just.
Ford, that is so powerful. I have so many friends who could benefit from hearing that right now, because we hold ourselves back. It's like this waiting game, like you're waiting for the big event. But I also want to point out something. I don't know if you realized what you said, because it's such a metaphor for your addiction.
Oh. Yeah. Wow. Totally.
Like you don't have to hit rock bottom.
No, you don't. You don't.
Right?
You're absolutely right. You don't.
Just like you don't have to wait for that exit.
No, you're so right. Wow. Wow. That is so real.
You could just live the life you want to live now.
100%. You absolutely can. Thank you for that.
Whether it's an exit or in my case, and sometimes your case, throwing a bomb in the middle of it.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Right?
Absolutely.
Or a samurai sword.
Or a samurai sword.
A lot more stylish.
Yes, it was, yeah, definitely more cinematic.
Okay, so Ultranative. So
Yeah.
what is Ultranative doing out in the world? Tell us about the fund.
So I started Ultranative. I came up with the name with a buddy. The domain was available. We thought it was a cool name. And then I was like, I got to figure out some like how to make this into some sort of brand or something. And so Ultranative for me, eventually, I mean, it's not Kismet. I can't remember what the name is, but there's some term for like whenever you come up with a name and then all of a sudden that name actually means something that you've always been after. It just like kind of like comes into your life. But for me, Ultranative is like it's a play on the word alternative. It's kind of like the ultra version of alternative. And so I kind of wanted to start with alternative medicine. And then I had this long-term strategy of like getting into alternative energy because a lot of my LP base is all oil and gas. A lot of them, that's what they invest in. And I really wanted to find a way to channel them into more impactful. And I think cheap energy is like such a important thing. So I'm not saying what they're doing is not important at all, but I think just more fringe. Yeah, absolutely. And so, and health focused, whatever. And so, Ultranative is a holding company, where somebody's described us as a studio, a venture studio. So we incubate 2 or 3 companies a year, sometimes organizations like this Minds, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we have a venture division. We have a venture fund. We've got a new fund that we're launching. Now, the venture fund right now is a psychedelic focused fund. The new fund that we're launching is more like early stage tech focused, but all of what we do, Ultranative in general, everything we do has this people planetary health focus. And a lot of, I think, in my first psilocybin experience, and none of my first psilocybin experience, and one of them, like a year after the fact of my first one, maybe sooner than that, regardless. I kept asking psilocybin, I was like, okay, what's the point of life? What's the point of life? And as one does. And all I could come up with was like, okay, this is a video game, and that I'm not saying it's a video game, and I'm not saying I'm like simulation theorist or anything. I think it's a fascinating concept. But okay, to put a frame of reference on how you're existing, this is a video game, like Ready Player One. And I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. I was like, okay, well, a video game's always had like a point in the game. Like, what's the point of the game? And all I could come up with was solve world peace. Like, that's the only thing. I was like, there's no, in this world, like, what is the point? And it's like, be nice and kind, find peace within yourself, and then help other people find peace. And so I was like, all right, cool. And then I became like a big fan of like Elon's, and I started watching like these kind of big moonshot ideas and like these kind of first principles thinking. And I'm like, okay, well, world peace, like what's the biggest lever you've pulled for solving your own peace? And I was like, eating mushrooms, like psychedelics, and I was like, okay, cool. So that's what you should do. You should figure out how to create access to plant medicines, psilocybin, ayahuasca, whatever. And my strategy has evolved, and my capital network is all oil and gas, and some of them are trying psilocybin now. Some of them are going in for their own like
how's that
solo
going?
Journeys. It's incredible. It's really cool. I get a call every month or so now with a new investor that's like, hey, like, interesting what you've been working on. I saw Huberman or Tim Ferriss or whatever, and I'd love to give it a shot, And so some of them aren't even investors in any of my psychedelic stuff, but they're just becoming more aware to it. And so some of them end up investing because they've had it. I mean, most people that actually have this experience, like they want to bring it to the world. It's such a viral experience that you're just like, I got to get involved, whether it's philanthropy or whatever, right? So I've had a lot of those experiences. And then my strategy's kind of been like, we invest in a lot of Elon's companies. We invest in nuclear energy. We invest in a lot of like big household name, like tech companies. We're doing a big humanoid robotics company right now. What else are we doing? We're doing companies that essentially they have this like through line of like solving people and planetary health issues. And so I can, find a way, like I can argue for that for nuclear energy. I can argue for that for like SpaceX and like access to Wi-Fi. Like Wi-Fi should be on like Maslow's hierarchy, access to internet information. Like that's really important to us. So whether it's healthcare or it's tech, like it all has some sort of like human flourishing element to it.
Service of humanity.
Yeah. So we incubate companies, we invest in companies, and then we incubated a nonprofit, a 501c3. We launched in January called Minds. And it's a mouthful, but it's the Multidisciplinary Investigations into Novel Discoveries and Solutions. minds in research. People use acronyms. So that was our acronym. And it's kind of modeled after MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I met the goal of like Ultranative is like this access to plant medicine. And I guess to tie everything back to like the oil and gas guys, like my strategy with them, and they all know this too, but it's like prove to them that I can have like incredible returns and like just more traditional venture type investments. And then they've now started to trust me and they're starting to invest in the psychedelic stuff. So like I'm just opening their minds up through investments, and I'm still channeling it towards that psychedelic, like plant medicine, functional medicine thing. But so mine's, the goal of the vision of Ultranative is like, like solve for world peace, but like below that, it's like expand access to psychedelic medicine. And what I was finding was when I relapsed on psilocybin, my dad and my mother like thought I had relapsed on drugs, Again, I was like pretty manic at the time. So like I can totally see how they're totally confused. But, 4 months later, I brought my dad home. I was like, they wouldn't talk to me, and I was like, you guys, this is not drugs. Like, this is medicine. Like, I'm better, And I brought my dad home, or for Christmas, I gave him Stealing Fire, which is a book by Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler. Jamie's a friend of mine. He's here in Austin, actually. And he went in and he talked about altered states of consciousness. And he really used like data-driven, I guess, terminology on how to explain like how we as humans have been like seeking altered states of consciousness, like since the beginning of time, whether it's chanting or meditation or yoga or psilocybin, right?
Or plant medicine that's been around for
100%, 100%. Yeah. And so that was the big inspiration. So I gave my dad that book, and it opens up with like Navy SEALs, and it's just talking about flow states. And he finishes the book in 3 days and he takes me out to dinner. And he like we've been like on the rocks. And he took me out to dinner and he's like, okay, I read your book. Tell me all of the psychedelics you've tried and what should I try next? Or what should I try first?
Wow. It's so cool. I just have to say this about your parents, and I hope I get to meet them someday.
I do too.
Because they sound incredible.
They're awesome.
And the way you talk about them. And I think one of the things just that I witnessed in you is they raised a super honest man. Super honest man. And the way you describe your conversations with your mom and dad, not once did they put shame on you. There's no shame, never came into the equation.
Never.
And it was always about love.
Yeah.
And it was always about honesty. Like even your dad in your story with the investors, raising the money for the film, and then you just gave the money back. I mean, that's high integrity.
Yeah, thank you.
That's honesty, and that's operating from a place of a lack of shame. Right? There's no shame in that when you're like, oops, not gonna raise the money for this. This isn't gonna work. Totally. So I'm gonna give you, you probably got, if I'm a betting woman, you probably got more investors out of that. Yeah. Because they trusted you, because they're like, oh, he just gave us our money back. This guy's gonna be a good shepherd of our money.
Yeah, totally.
So I have to say that.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I also I want to say too that it was definitely all about love with my parents and no shame. And that's, I discovered this in this Iboga experience, this African shrub that I ate 2 years ago that healed my brain. I had this experience where I witnessed the reason why my mom put me on meds, because I was so angry. I was so frustrated. I could not get over this resentment. And I relived this. I didn't relive anything. It created this cinematic experience where I was told a story that did not exist. The story, there were real people that took place in this experience, but I watched essentially a metaphor for why my mother put me on meds, which was because she loved me. And in an instant that vanished, and I think that it's all been about love. And you're right. The whole shame thing, I think whenever we were having a kind of a prep the other day, you were asking what is another thing you want to get across? I think no shame about anything, that helps so much. You're going to get so much further in life. And it's something I have to retrain myself to think about all the time, when I have a business that's not doing well and I don't want to send that quarterly investor update. I want to wait another month until something good's happened. It's just do it. Just own up for it. Just say what it is. It's going to look worse in 6 months when it's still not good and they haven't heard anything from you, So,
your earnestness is, I think, what attracts people like myself and others to you. It's why your network is so amazing, because there's just this earnestness, this purity to you, and that You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so minds. I think one of the things that's super cool about minds that you're doing is there's lots of studies out there that are focused on hallucinogenics and depression and trauma and obviously the urgent things that we have to deal with. But you're taking a different approach with minds. Tell us about what minds is really seeking to understand and open up for people.
Yeah, cool. Minds, inspired by my dad's like experience with stealing fire, and like I saw that media can just flip people instantaneously, right? We see that unfortunately in culture today. But I was like, okay, well, there's like a certain percentage of the population that like, if psychedelics keep running down this westernized medical like track, there's like a lot of the population that's going to be like, I'm not anxious or depressed. So like psychedelics aren't for me, and then they're going to miss out on so much of these benefits, that I think we all can like benefit from. And so I kind of had this thesis that like, we have to figure out how to speak to my dads of the world, who are only going to respond to like flow states and like what are Navy SEALs doing to like achieve peak performance and
scientific breakthroughs.
100%. These like what, like these things that actually like have commercial value, right? That are the byproducts of psychedelic experiences. And so there's been a lot of history. I'd say some anecdotal and actually some hard evidence from like the inventors themselves, the people who have had big breakthroughs on psychedelics that have then turned out to be big, technologies that they've then like monetized and been impactful for the world. Francis Crick, who discovered the double helix DNA strand, credits LSD for having discovered that.
It's wild.
Carrie Mullis, who developed the PCR technology, like the nose swab technology, same thing, LSD. And obviously there's a lot of other like Silicon Valley, stories. Tim Ferriss had told me a story personally like 3 years ago about a friend that he knew that I won't say his name. He didn't actually say his name for what it's worth. If the guy's watching, he did not share your name. But he told me this story about this guy that had done 5-MeO DMT and called Tim and said, "Hey Tim, I did 5-MeO and I was given the mathematical equation for warp drive, for time travel." Have I told you this?
No.
Yeah. And Tim's like pretty out there thinker, right? And Tim's like, okay, like I'm listening. And the guy goes, well, I've spent the past 2 weeks writing it down and I've got it. And I said a paper. He's like, can you help me validate it? And so Tim's like, okay, I'm like, yeah, sure. And I won't say who he sent it to, but he sent it to a very like thought leader in the quantum physics space, like a team. And they called him back and they said, Tim, where did you get this? We cannot disprove this theory. Yeah, like it kind of checks out. Not only I don't know the exact terminology, but they were essentially like, dude, where, how did you discover this? And so now this guy is actually like, he's a successful founder in Silicon Valley, and he's now funding this new research initiative trying to commerciobase time travel.
That's mind blowing.
Because of a 5-MeO experience. So he told me that, and I was like, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard, from a very obviously valid source. And so sat with me, and then a year and a half later, it was at a friend's birthday, and we met one of our friends, somebody who was described to me as a polymath, this guy, Dr. Bruce Damer. And he looks like Gandalf. And like my wife and I were leaving the party. We hadn't talked to this guy yet. I was like, I gotta talk. I don't know what a polymath is, but I gotta find out. And he shares with me, he's like, oh, you're in psychedelics. I'm in the psychedelic space too. He's like 60 years old. He said, I just came out of the psychedelic closet. And I'm like, what does that mean? And he said, well, I was just the keynote at ESPD, which is this ethnobotanical pharmacology conference over in the UK, the psychedelic conference. And he said, my keynote was called High Time for Science. And I just now came out to all of my colleagues and officially let them know that, so he's like, I'm kind of a well-known astrobiologist. He was a former NASA astrobiologist. And he said, I have the leading theory on the origin of life. I have like the most cited theory on where we came from, like as a species, or how organic life started on Earth. And he said, and I had my big breakthrough, the 20-year project I've been trying to solve. And I had my big breakthrough while in an ayahuasca ceremony. And he had started, he had done 30 sessions and he had done a full dose on like night one. He didn't do this consecutively, but by the 30th time he did ayahuasca, he was using like a 1/30th of a dose, dropping it on his tongue and using meditation and kind of trying to stimulate his own DMT, a practice he'd been working on for a long time. And then he had this big break. He had this healing experience. This is actually like really crucial to our work because we're getting, there's a lot of people that hear what I'm saying and they're like, you're trying to like bastardize psychedelics and, get VC bros to like start doing them more, just like, and what I'm really doing is I'm trying to like, yes, I am trying to align with capitalism. I'm trying to accelerate the adoption of psychedelics because I honestly, wholeheartedly believe like we're going to blow ourselves up if we don't like start like,
we don't change the way.
100%. Yeah. So yes, I am. I'm trying to align with capitalism and the adoption of psychedelics. And so I feel to do that, we have to prove that these scientific breakthroughs actually can be had. These are tools for scientific breakthroughs. They can be. But what I want to preface this by saying is that you really have to, we find you have to do not even we find, I believe this to be true. You really have to do the healing before you can do the revealing. You like have to go through these healing processes. And there's a buddy of mine, Brian Rescue, wrote a book, New York Times bestseller, called The Immortality Key. Have you ever read this book? Highly, highly recommend this book. But he went in and he's an attorney turned like just investigative journalist author who has written this book and drawn many correlations between many of the world's leading religions to early use of entheogenic psychedelic medicines. Starting back with paganism, and then before that, the Greeks used something called the kykeon, which is this brew. It was rumored, nobody really knew what it was. They thought it was this wine, and there was this moment. There's this ceremony that lasted for 2,000 years. Okay, and I think it ended in like 800 A.D. But it lasted for 2,000 years in ancient Greece, and anybody in Greece that spoke Greek. And wasn't a murderer, those were like the two prerequisites, could come and attend this like rite of passage once in their life. And it really was like a 3-year process, this like 3-year initiation process. And very little's known about like what the initiation was, even like the 2 years leading up into it. But there was this 11-day pilgrimage that would happen to this town of Eleusis, which was like 14 or 15 miles outside of Athens in the mountains. And you would make this pilgrimage. You'd go through this 2-year kind of rite of passage, kind of not indoctrination, just rite of passage. I don't know. You would go through, you'd be kind of prepped for this big experience. And then you'd have this 11-day pilgrimage. You'd hike up to the mountains. And then on one of the nights, and it might be 2 of the nights, but I'm certain it's one of the nights, they had this almost like Parthenon-like structure in this kind of walled off space. And then everybody would disappear into this area. And there'd be this ceremony. And for forever, they thought it was like some sort of sex cult. They had no idea what was going on during this like one experience. And there's a Yale researcher, an ethnobotanist who has been studying these dig sites in Greece, and then found a very similar one in Spain. And so whenever they found the Greece site, usually what happens is the archaeologists go in and they lacquer all of the pottery that they find as soon as they can to preserve it. And so it's hard for an ethnobotanist is essentially trying to find out what people were eating. And
so it's hard for them to get a sample.
Hard for them to get a sample, right? Well, Spain, he found a new site. And they found a site that had been found for a while, but he found new pottery. And so he went in and he found these little chalices and he scraped the chalices. And these chalices are identical. The dig site, the site in Spain is almost identical to the site in Athens. And the same sort of like process was held around each one of these sites every single year. And the same types of little cups were found there. And in the cups in Spain, they scraped them out and they found the presence of ergot, which is the precursor to LSD. And so there's a strong evidence suggesting that ancient Greece, or the foundation of democracy, was developed by a society that had a very ceremonial, respectful use and integration of psychedelic medicine.
And that had a tremendous amount of innovation.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
okay.
Those are kind of all of the inspirations for what we're doing at Minds. We've got a 3-year program at the University of Texas where we are studying initially psilocybin for the enhancement of creativity and problem solving. And we're trying to go back in and prove that, that initially, like through academia, we really want to prove that like you can enhance creativity and like have novel breakthroughs under the influence. We do think that, like, again, you have to go through this healing process. Bruce, I'm sorry to jump back real quick, but like Bruce didn't have his breakthrough until he was adopted at birth. And that 30th night of ayahuasca, he relived his birth experience and went back and heard his mother's voice for the first time. Had never heard it in his life, was adopted 7 days after birth and had like closure on that part of his life. And so ayahuasca like has this kind of way of like kind of speaking to you and essentially said to him, like, now that you've learned where you came from, would you like to know where we all come from? You know? And
that was the big unlock.
That was the big unlock. And he, as he described it, he became the first protocell that rode in. He rode in on an asteroid through the atmosphere, landed in a geyser, and then watched himself go through this wet, dry process, and then felt himself split. He became the first protocell and felt himself split, and then journaled it all down. And then in a breathwork ceremony session, a solo session, like 30 days later, was brought back to the experience in like a 40-minute episode, and put all the pieces together and called his partner and told him to meet him at the lab. And that night they solved the origin of life. Origin of life, yeah.
That's bananas.
It's bananas, yeah.
So Ford, if I could summarize everything that we've talked about, what I hear from you is that you have healed yourself in order to heal others so that we can then go heal this planet.
I hope so.
And I see you getting emotional about it because it's a big, big dream. Is that what's making you emotional?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I don't know. I honestly think like ever since I got off the meds, I've been so emotional. But I mean, I think it's such a blessing too. You know, I just like,
it's information.
For years, I couldn't cry. I didn't cry for like from 26 to like 27, or like from 15 to 26 or whatever. So I feel like I'm like getting it all back. But yeah, it's information. You're right.
Yeah.
It looks like a little unstable. So
what is it? What is it telling you now?
What is it telling me now?
What are these tears saying?
Just like keep on going, you know, like keep on having fun. I have so much fun. My life is so much fun. And he's like, it's back to that. Like, don't wait till your exit to like realize you can do anything. It's like every single day is such a blast. And my life is like, and not everything is perfect, you know?
Yeah.
Companies are always like exploding and going wrong. But like, I think, you know, I don't know. I just have like a good attitude about it. And I trust that we'll get where we're going. And so I don't know. The optimism is like, being optimistic just makes life a lot more fun.
Yeah.
So, and
keep going forward.
Yeah. Thank you.
Keep going. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Bringing so much of your heart.
Thank you. I had no choice. I don't know. Thank you.
We have no choice, do we?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right. Well, all right. I'm rooting for you. I hope we're on this journey together.
We absolutely are. We 100% are. I felt it the moment I met you.
Yeah.
I walked away and I was like, I was lit. I was so stoked to know you. And so.
Yeah, I feel the same way. We haven't figured it out yet. But
I know.
It'll unfold.
Of course, I know it will.
Yeah, I trust in that too.
Yeah, I do 200%.